And the ability to put up very large tents quickly.
All right. Randy's giving me the thumbs up. I think Ellen is monitoring our virtual world.
No,
So I'll go ahead and kill that GoToMeeting I have.
Yes, we must all be trainers with the backup to the backup to the, we will somehow get the message out. So we are, Randy, we are live. Welcome, virtual world. Sorry for the delay and leaving you hanging there for a few minutes. We've had some technical difficulties and we switched rooms for a second. All right, what you're all here for is not me, Steve Lee of Allen Interactions. I am so glad you're here. After the whole Addie to Sam, once I started using prototyping, it saved me 20 hours of my last project. So I am psyched to see what even more you have to say about it. And without further ado,
Thank you very much.
take it away.
So what I want to do is, I have a ton of slides that I do not want to go through. I'm famous for never finishing a PowerPoint deck in my life. People get mad at me if I don't have one, so I have one. What I'd rather do is, knowing that I have the slides and I've already emailed them, that all of these slides are available. So after the presentation, if you're going through any slides and have any questions, feel free to ask. So what I'd rather do is make it a conversation. And I am happy to jump in if we have examples, and being it's about prototyping, at some point we'll take a little breather and someone will bring the flip chart in. Because one of the things that we really recommend people do when they're doing prototyping is do it in whatever tool you have. And you guys may or may not know much about interactions. Does anyone not know about us, our interactions? Some people don't. Okay, this will be the abridged history. I was in London and I saw the abridged works of William Shakespeare, and they went through all of them in about an hour and a half, and then they took the comedies and not worth going into. So this is sort of the quick version. Dr. Allen was at Control Data and was head of research and development of Plato, which was sort of the first e-learning tool. It wasn't called e-learning back then. They also developed the first learning management system. And then Control Data thought that a PC was stupid. So Apple gave Dr. Allen some money and he created a company called Authorware that had a product called Authorware that sort of owned the e-learning industry for a while. That was back when it was YCAT and Tencore and Quest and Toolbook, and Authorware sort of rose to the top. Then they did a 50-50 merger with a company called Macromedia Paracom that had Director and some 3D products. They became Macromedia, and that's when everyone goes, oh, I've heard of them. And most people have heard of them because they bought this little-known vector-based animation package called Future Splash. Because back then they just came out with CD-ROM, Director was slow, bitmapped animation, they bought that, and someone got the bright idea to put a scripting language on it, and Flash was born. And then Macromedia sort of forgot about Director and Authorware when they sold to Adobe. Adobe completely retired those products, and Flash became sort of the de facto for doing e-learning, which was interesting because Dr. Allen, who was at Control Data, said, you know, the really, really bad part about using this tool isn't the tool. It's the fact that we have to give everything on paper to programmers. And so the idea was we need to have a tool that instructional designers can use. And in fact, they could sketch their ideas. They should be able to do quick prototypes. And the idea of a prototype is that people could visualize how something would work. So Authorware, that was sort of its big thing, is you could rapidly do prototyping. But then as everything moved to Flash, people stopped prototyping because it takes quite a bit to do Flash. And then the rapid tools came out, and then people almost forgot to do prototyping because they figured we can go straight to PowerPoint in. If you can import your PowerPoints, what do you need to prototype? Because it's just going to suck it right in. And we felt that people stopped kind of working through these grand ideas because it was almost the industry made that so hard compared to what it took with the rapid tools that the value proposition sort of took over. So luckily, people are finding out, we call it the roller coaster in our industry, is people get whatever tools out there, everything's easy, they're great, and then a year or two later they find out people are using really bad behaviors they didn't learn. So they go, we do something wrong. Now, being in the vendor industry, we would always wait until they found out nothing worked, and then they would pay us money to fix it. And then after a year saying we're paying them too much, we can do it ourselves, and so we kind of rode this vendor roller coaster. Well, we've seen the tools do that. And so the tools have gotten to where, well, we can just do it ourselves, we don't need any vendors, and now we're starting to have people reaching out to us saying, we're not able to do what we do in the tools, we would like to find something better. Now, during all of this time, the reason Dr. Allen created Authorware was because of something that he called Successive Approximation, which is rapid prototyping. So this is in the 70s, he wrote a paper on it, he wrote books, we've been using it at Authorware, and then Allen Interactions, which was the spin-off, that when Macromedia said we're selling boxes, we don't care if you know how to use it. That's not quite exactly what it was. But a lot of the people that were at Authorware went to Macromedia, they were from Minneapolis, they moved in here, and they went back. So Allen Interactions was pretty much that core Authorware services team that kind of came back. We used a process called SAM. We called it Successive Approximation. We then called it Savvy because we thought that was a nice take on it. And someone asked us 3 years ago, would you ever productize that? Because people that you don't do work for might find this valuable. And Agile was getting really big in the software industry, and someone said, you know that Savvy thing you do, it seems a lot like Agile. Did you base it on Agile? We're going, well, actually, Dr. Allen started this in the 70s, so it's sort of the chicken egg thing. So that's sort of the abridged history of how we got here. So now Dr. Allen has done is he's written a book on SAM, and it's called Leaving Addy for SAM. And you guys might have seen, yes?
I just want to interject. We're having a little trouble with the feed, and
Okay.
so some of the virtual participants were hoping they could email questions afterwards.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that would be no problem.
We got you guys. We're
All right.
I'll make that happen. Thank you.
While she's broken your flow, quick question. Do you have a Twitter handle in which, so I can credit everything you're saying as I
Right.
tweet this?
I would credit Allen Interactions would be
Which
the
is
Twitter.
custom e-learning.
Yes. So now I started in military, McDonnell Douglas, and then Hughes training. So I worked on E6A, the C-141, the B-1 bomber. We really used ADDIE, and I would say I haven't found many people that didn't come from that really, because there is pages and pages and pages of what all those boxes mean, and boxes behind the boxes and boxes behind the boxes. And so I thought it was interesting, so we use ADDIE. I'm like, you do? So it took you 6 months to get your learning analysis done? Because that's about what it would take. Like, well, no. I'm like, well, okay. You're using what we call ADDIE adjusted. You've kind of used the acronym, and then you're trying to figure out how we get from gate to gate to gate. And the question would be, well, how's it going for you? And they would say all the things that were kind of problematic, and it was pretty common. And so we thought Successive Approximation would address a lot of those problems. So that's why we wrote the book. Dr. Allen wrote the book, some of this helped. So we'll do this very quickly. Now the reason I want to go through this quickly is because I want to get to what this talk is about, is how you prototype, which is one component of it. But I want us to talk about what you're working on and how we would start that sketching prototyping process, and how if you do it right, it actually goes very quick, it goes very easy. So I'm going really fast. If you want me to slow down, please let me know. All right, so are we going okay? The pace okay? We're going through this quickly. All right, so the idea of it is very first, the preparation phase, it's information gathering, which you do in ADDIE. Being that we're a vendor, this is pretty much where we say, send me everything you have. Send me all your PowerPoints, send me all your resource material, send me any user analysis, because to us, when we work with a client, they've done all of this. Like, well, just go ahead and send it. And in one of the slides, I'll tell you how we tweak that a little bit. So after we do that, and again, I'm just doing kind of a high level, then we do what's called iterative design, and this is where everyone thinks SAM is in the middle. And then we also have something called iterative development. So the rapid prototyping, and you see the word prototype there in iterative design is what we're going to focus on. Now this will be my version, my kind of high level view of this. This is not necessarily in the book, it is not in the class that we teach for a couple days or the ATD. To me, the pragmatic view of why you would use SAM, other than all of the advantages of the process, is if you're willing to focus on the activities instead of the content. And I mean seriously focus on activities. So I was a college professor for 10 years. And you know in ILT, you come up with these great activities. You probably go to conferences and people show you, get everyone to stand up, get them in groups, have them do a multiple choice question by dividing, have them get a leader, have a debate. I mean, there's all kinds of wonderful, have little flashcards, there's all these great things to get people in. Let's say you have 10 of these and you have a new curriculum to write. You would probably look at those 10 and go, can I map some of my content to those activities? And the ones that fit, all right, that's good. I cleared a third of it out. Then you might tweak some of those activities, or you might create some new activities. And you're going to end up with maybe 20% of the content. You go, you know what, I'm just going to have to talk about this. But we don't do that in e-learning. We tend not to, other than going to e-learning brothers and finding a Jeopardy game, which let me tell you, that is the worst idea in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm going to explain why really quickly. Jeopardy is a great game. But if you try to reason why Jeopardy is a great game, I go with the movie White Man Can't Jump. If you've ever seen that, Rosie Perez, the girlfriend, thinks she's going to get on Jeopardy. And she spent 3 years reading the encyclopedia and reading the dictionary because she was motivated to read. And then when she played, she wanted to win real money, and there was competition. So she was focused. Does any of that happen when you buy the Jeopardy template from the E-Learning Brothers and you put it in front of someone? No, because the first time they see the content is when you give them the first answer, and then when they pick the question, that's all they see, and they see it only once, and then it's gone. So one, if you're trying to teach them the fact, you can't teach a fact without repetition. There's no repetition in that Jeopardy game. They didn't prepare, and they didn't win any money. Now, if you want to turn it around and say there's real money, you're playing against other students, and you have 2 weeks to get ready, and then they are given the website PDFs, they might, if there's enough money involved, spend the next 2 weeks getting ready, and then just by getting them motivated, they've learned. So that's the whole idea. However, I love using the idea of Jeopardy's an activity. If in SAM you said, I hate to admit, Jeopardy would be a great activity, you would spend time refining that. What is give the answer? What's the question? What is double jeopardy? How do you bet? Who wins? How do you buzz in? All of that around it, which is the rules of the game. If you said, I only have one board full, 5 categories, I just have 25, you can refine that and refine it and get people trying it out and get it towards perfect and then go, wow, now how much content do I have that would fit in this? So if you were to look at your content at a high level and say, let's find out what activities that are based on the rules of the job I can come up with, and then look at the content after, that's what my talk is about, is how you figure out to prototype that. Now at the high level, we feel that that does 2 things from a productivity standpoint. One, your subject matter experts on a Jeopardy game are writing answers and questions. They are not writing what the board looks like with the colors, with the lights, the font you're using in the word Jeopardy. But in what we do traditionally, subject matter experts end up on that, whether you're good at it or not. Now, I know a lot of people do both roles, but I'm saying if you are doing both roles and you're effective, it's because you're a hybrid. Your subject matter expertise is not what makes you a good instructional designer. But when you end up working with subject matter experts that aren't, but then you ask them, I need you to write a paragraph to explain a concept, then you're actually asking them to do kind of an instructional design of how do people think wrapped around a paragraph, and that's where we think the problem comes in. So the idea of this is getting those activities. And then when you go in iterative development at the high level, if you have 5 Jeopardy kind of games, then all you're doing is figuring out what is the situation that happens on the job, what should someone do, what shouldn't they do, and if they do it wrong, what's the consequence? And the hardest thing, I think, is to write distractors that are wrong. And the reason is, and this is just our thing, no one should ever be able to get through an e-learning activity on the first try. Because if they did, they didn't need it because they already knew it, or it was too easy. And if common sense gets you through it, well then why are you doing any training? Because common sense would help them on the job. So our question is, if you gave them the website or brochure and they wouldn't make a mistake, then you don't need training. So if we're building training, it's because they will make a mistake. So you need to define what that mistake is. The wrong answer should be the one that is clearly what anyone would choose before they know what to do. So when we're going through this, we're really kind of searching for that. In the iterative development, if you were then doing it, say, subject matter expert, give me those situations. In fact, here's Jeopardy, write answers and questions, and you tell me which is an $800, what's a $1,600. All of a sudden, your subject matter expert is very focused, and they're actually really productive. And they're actually enjoying it because then you can maybe put those answers and questions into Jeopardy in a couple of days, and then they get to see them and go, now that I see it, I don't so much like that. And then they actually will review, because reviewing a storyboard, reviewing a Word document is painful. All right, so that is my abridged sound. And so what I want to do very quickly is say, if we focus first on the preparation phase, what's different? So I assume you guys can read, so I'm going to focus on the red text. In black is what I'm sure you all ask, and a whole lot more. Are you asking the red questions? HSBC came to us 732 modules that need to be completed in 7 months because they did not get involved in the mortgage crisis, and they bought 3,500 branches of banks that went under and absorbed all their employees all over the world and needed to train them all on everything they do. Insurance, loans, credit card, like everything. And so they had a 17% completion rate. That they had a learning management system and only 17% of people finished. The rest said, I don't need a promotion, I don't need a raise, I'm going to find another job. Because what we didn't do is figure out what will they do to finish, and then next, will they believe you? Which, just because you put it in training, we found that the number one reason people make mistakes on the job is not because they don't know, it's because they either think they know better, or they don't care what the right answer is because they're going to do whatever gets them through the day quicker and makes their life less painful. And then will they try it? This is what we call the infomercial phase. How many people have tried PX90? How many people have tried Atkins? I mean, they get you to try it, and then you actually, when it's not working, stick in there long enough. And then when it doesn't work, you'll try something just like it. Just a little different, because they so focus on the goal. But we, is what I call the training industry, are too ethical to believe in propaganda. And I believe in a concept of positive propaganda that we really, because we're telling the truth. There is so much in it that if you as a student will just try it, just stick with it a little longer. And in fact, we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to complete this course. We want you to. We want you to get through it quickly. In fact, we'll tell you, if you do it in this manner, it'll take you less attempts. It'll take you less time. You'll learn it. And then will they believe you? One thing is when you know what the mistakes are and you know the consequences. You use that to build training, but you know what we don't think we have time to do? Tell the students. If we did something for a cable company and it was about where you park your van, and it was supposed to be in front of the house on that side of the street. Pretty simple. Everyone read it. 97% of people got it right on the test. But it's still one of the biggest complaints. So we created an activity where they could take the van, put it anywhere they wanted. In the driveway, down the street, across the street. They put it in the driveway, they'd run over a tricycle. They put it down the street, teenagers would break in and steal all their tools. They'd park on the side of the house, and someone would scream because they're walking by a bathroom window. You know what the students did? They spent all the time putting it everywhere wrong, and the last thing they did was put it where they knew, and then they go, oh, I get it. Because now I know why you're telling me what the right answer is, because if you don't, they'll go, I might know better. So all of that kind of gets to this, when you're going through that traditional audience analysis, we really want to know why not. Now, how does it go into prototyping? Because when you prototype, we think you need to prototype, one, making sure the wrong answer is somehow put in front of them, like that's the one I'll pick. How do you prototype so they get to see consequences? You guys have all heard the term rubric. I would really love to find a way to prototype the rubric somehow on the screen, so they can visually see it, and they can see the effect of that. Now, when we're getting into that, you can prototype this in anything. You can prototype in PowerPoint. So here's the first thing I'll say that's relevant to the speech topic. let's say you built the entire course and it's 6 months from now, and you're showing it to the president of Apple Computer, and they give you maybe 5-10 minutes. Whatever you pick in that 5-10 minutes is what you should pick to build your prototype. And does the president of Apple know that if I took the mouse and I click, hello, there it is. If I say, okay, what I need to do is click where they finish and then it moves forward, because that's the right answer, would the person watching me know that that's the only thing that's active, and then when I go to the next screen, I have a little script that says click will they finish, and then click will they stick to it, and no. So these are kind of the high level. Whenever you're doing this prototype of this, there's no reason it has to completely function, because the first job of a prototype is to get people to understand what you're doing and to get buy-in. So that's sort of my first one. Okay, the next we'll go into is on the same mode. You guys have seen this, and I've heard it's changed. Some people think that we're in the 10% of formal training, and so what we need to do is change our model to, which is true, if we can get social media, we can get people involved, we can have SurveyMonkey. How do we kind of take what we do into the 70-20? And I'd say, well, you know, if you are going to go back to prototyping, and you're going to try to do something that's more activity-based, there's no reason that you can't do the 20 and the 70. But this gets to the design of practice. If you're doing practice and they have to do it more than one attempt, and you have the rubric, which is what's going to happen on the job, and you are doing experience and feedback and coaching, because you're letting them practice what they would really do. Now, I know this is a whole like knowledge versus activity base. And again, the reason we're talking about this in prototyping is because we really think that if you prototype, that you're going to go, you know what, it's not so bad. We think, and let me, I'll get to that slide. So I always get ahead of myself. This is sort of our mantra, that if you put them in something where they're actually experiencing using the information, that's going to motivate them, and it hits back to those kind of high level of, you know, will they believe you? Will they try it? Will they stick to it? Let's see, I just want to kind of. So what we were talking about before, and again, this is one of the slides I'm going to just cover really quickly, is this is all around that learning analysis, that when we're doing the analysis and we're figuring out what the learners would do wrong, we're figuring out what the learners would do on the job, what the rubric is. We also are looking at all these different modalities, but we put them in more of sometimes same time, same place, ILT, same time, different place, different time, different place, and we call it enhanced practice. And the reason we talk about this is because when you get to that enhanced practice, when we're doing prototyping, we want to prototype not traditionally learning, where what we call is there's the learning moment and there's the performance moment. Traditionally, we say you need to learn before you perform. We need to get you to be competent before we put you on the job. However, in the past 5 to 10 years, if I go to buy a cell phone, 10 years ago, if I walked in and I said, this is what I need, and the person said, let me go look that up, I'm not sure which one I ought to recommend to you, I would probably walk away. Now, if they pull out their iPad and they go, hold on, all right, so how often do you do email? All right, do you watch movies? How much do you download? You know, you just kind of do it. They go, okay, well, recommends these phones, and all they need to do is then explain to me, you know, why I would like one or the other, or know where they are in the store. The being that's changed, that when we're doing prototyping, we want to go ahead and prototype what we call the blended learning of. In the prototype, if there is a job aid that might be on an iPad, we would want to prototype a picture of like an iPad and bring it up. And then we want an activity where you're using the exact same job aid to figure out the activity as you would in the real world. And the reason I'm saying all this is because when we then start prototyping a little bit, start to sketch things out, I'm kind of giving you some of the things that you should be thinking about, which is if you're on the job and you're going to give them a job aid, we want the job aid to be part of the design of the prototype, however you're going to do it. And in fact, we've got a client that we're going to go see next week. And to not give anything away, they gave us a 25-page long document of rules and regulations and compliance. They gave us a budget that is 75% of what Brandon Hall says it should take to build 1 hour of learning. And they want them to know all this inside and out. Scratching our head. Like, all right, so in our prototyping, because we need them to visualize this, we said, well, pretend that's a PDF. Can we create an activity where you have to figure something out and then you go look at it? What we did in the prototype is we then went into Word to create an outline format and had section, paragraph, topic, and then part of the activity we prototyped out even on whiteboarding is you would put in like the law book. Paragraph 3, section 5, item 3 would be your answer. Because then we knew they would go when they would look at it. They wanted it to be a 90-minute e-learning. They assumed we would create a PowerPoint presentation with everything in this 20-some-odd page document that was bullet pointed out, sliding bullets in, some graphic. Ouch! And then we have a narration over the top of it to say everything that we didn't put on the screen because that's too much text on the screen. And we're like, well, they never would have bought this if we didn't say, okay, in 1 hour, let's get a whiteboard out and let's prototype the thought here. Let's get that Word document up. Let's put in some paragraphs and then let you experience it. And we actually had them play a little bit of the game because we could. We just had paper and little note cards and we printed out the document and we kind of, on the right answers, we just wrote the little numbers and we're like, all right, how do you feel about it? Like, mostly okay, but these are our problems. Like, fix it. Be like creating a game of life and you're just sort of, building it up from the beginning and how would you make a choice. And we kind of did the same thing for an insurance company. A very big software company, the biggest in the world, but I'm not saying where they are, decided to go cafeteria plans for their insurance. Well, now they had to train all the employees why that's a good idea. And there's choices. And what is my deductible? And, do I want to have a self-savings account or not? And I can choose that. And it's like, that explodes. So it was the idea of, well, they could either explain them all or let's play a game, the game of life, and let's prototype that out. And we prototyped it out, we let them play it and feel like, well, this might work. But in those prototypes, they said, but this is what I don't like. So the idea of the prototype is, whatever it is, if 20% of it sticks on the wall and 80% falls off, that's great. And then the next one, 40%, and 60, then 80. Then eventually you'll get 100, everyone says it's 100. We know when you get to alpha, beta, they're going to change your mind. But the idea is to get them to alpha faster. So the reason I have this slide up is because whenever you're thinking about a prototype in today's world, don't forget that there are other modalities because that prototype, you should go ahead and cover the other modalities, go ahead and prototype out a job aid. Go ahead and prototype the idea of, what if we had some kind of social media like a leaderboard? What if we had something where we have another client that, and I can say this because Toyota, we're doing talks with them, and so we're telling the world. They have collections agents. People call you up on the phone and try to convince you to pay money. They actually have all of the employees submit what is the craziest customer they had this week. And then if that ends up being something we're going to do, pop it in, we have this game of trying to sell the customer, trying to get everything they owe paid. So if we have these social media of getting them to submit it and explain why. So it isn't just the customer, but their explanation of, all of the things that touched on regulations, standard operating procedures, that, you have to partner. So they're kind of like writing what you should have done to get the client. And then that person wins, and then every so often they have 15 minutes a week, that's it. 15 minutes a week for personal development, and what they used to do is read magazines. Now they want to jump in and take the next module. Because they want to see what customer that is. They want to see who, did you get the divorced grandmother who, whose spouse has the car but they're not on the contract, and she actually said, well, just go to their house and we can't do that to be possession. So then she went and stole the vehicle, brought it back to her house, and then called and says, I'm in the vehicle, come get it. And, this actually happened. Well, that's the scenario that's in it. So that idea, I'm just saying, in the prototyping, go ahead, start thinking through that. All right. And then the last thing that we would say on all of this is, as you're looking at that, and again, this is the preparation phase, and this is sort of the analysis of what the behaviors are supposed to be. The learners It's learner analysis, audience analysis, sort of needs analysis. Bless you. And that's what we're talking about is your learners can be an asset. And so when you're doing prototyping, bless you, if you can figure out how to prototype that user involvement, at Toyota what they're also doing is it's in a class. So it's e-learning, but it's facilitated, meaning that the instructor runs through one module with the class and gets some things wrong. And so at the end, they say, oh, you didn't get it right, you gotta do it over. Then the class starts repeating. It's really hard to get it all right. So no one ever does on the first try. On the second try, we found that about 30% of the class gets it right on the second try. They are now mentors, and then they go help the people that didn't. On the third try, and then we found that at the fourth try, 99% get it by the fourth try. So everything has been built around. So when we were prototyping this out, we actually prototyped that whole idea of having these students, start to spread out and help each other to make sure that everyone got done at the same time. All right. So I know that's a little bit different. I wanted the talk today to be different than usual. That stuff's not in the book. It's not in the traditional classes. That's more of what we see happening. So then let me, come on. All right. So in the actual iterative design phase, when we work with a client, we have a 2-day savvy start, which is what we're about to mock here. We come in and we say for 2 days, we want everyone in the room. If there is a person who 6 months from now will say, I don't like it, start over, we need them in the room. And if you're going to prototype out the game of life, that person will actually really enjoy being there. That is the person when you do a demo, you're only demoing about 5% of the whole thing. And if they see that 5% and they're kind of involved at the beginning, then we found that it makes it much easier, as long as that's what the activity is, for them to not look as much at the content, which that's usually not their forte anyways. So that's the idea of allowing the stakeholders to see the direction, reducing the risk of big change, all team members participate. This is where we have a subject matter expert, instructional designer, media. We have them all in the room. Now the goal is you guys have all seen something like this. In SAM, we believe in prototyping level 3 first. Because if we can get 80% of your content out in these activities, then you only then go to level 2 on, can the students do the activities? And if not, like, no, they have some content they don't understand. They're missing some facts, they're missing some concepts. Well, we'll take the stuff that they don't quite understand and we'll say they're at level 2 that we can build. And then after we do that, whatever's left is level 1. We found that we do that, it actually goes faster and it's more efficient, but that is not what most people do. They're sort of going, well, this is all the stuff that's level 1, and then how much money do we have left? It's sort of, well, we've got 5,000, 10,000 left, or we have 100 hours left. Oh, wonderful, let's go ahead and try to build a level 3. Now, we're not saying that you should spend 90% of the budget. We're saying, go ahead and take a third of the budget and build as many level 3s as you can, and then with whatever's left, you start backing your way out. Now, that concept I said of the PDF, if you could get that to work, you don't need any level 1s, because it means instead of a next button, you've got students that are Googling, they're Wikipediaing. And I think that's one of the thing that these prototypes will do, is I think you'll be able to prove with students, and that's what prototypes are supposed to do, is you get different levels of prototypes you eventually get in front of your actual students. And then you'll see if they like that, because you know what, the web page already exists, I'm sure. There's probably some PDFs out there. You wouldn't have to have much work to see how effective it is for a student to go look it up. And I say that I taught college for 10 years, and I would never give any students these days War and Peace or Moby Dick and think they wouldn't drop out of school the next day. However, if I gave them a game and a cheat manual that could fill up that wall, they will not sleep and drink as much caffeine as necessary until they got through the cheat manual, because they're looking stuff up. They're not going from beginning to end. They're hitting a screen and going, I just died. All right, I gotta go figure out how not to die. And it's sort of this back and forth. So this will be, let's see, I just want to check. Yeah, now I have, okay, good. I want to get through these. Okay, so the I know, you went right to the last one because it's bold, I got that. When you're doing these activities, and I talked about Jeopardy, when you prototype, we want you to focus on whatever that content is it a fact? And by fact, I mean when I say 7 times 8 is?
56.
Now, when I do it, I say 56, and I still go, is that right? Because it's been so long since I memorized it, but I memorized it over and over and over and over again. Adult learners don't like that. They really get angry when you do repetition. However, if I was to say I want you to get 10 math questions done in 20 seconds, and then I get you, and you only get 3 of them right, and I go back the second time, and a third of them are the same ones that you saw the last attempt, you're happy, because you're like, I know that one. So you're actually now pleased when I give you repetition, because you're like, well, cool. I hope the next time I get at least half of ones I've seen before. And all of a sudden you're begging for repetition because it's going to get you to your goal. Now, 2 things. 1, you can trick an adult learner to repetition. And 2, only do it if it's really something 6 months from now that they need to know, that that acronym is important, that it needs to be instinctual, and don't treat everything else that way. If you're going to give it to them once and ask them a quiz 2 minutes later, they're going to get the quiz right because they just saw it. If you could ask them an hour later, would they get it? So if you said, if a student has to know this an hour from now, would you do your learning any different? We have these games, and if you go get some help, like great, go get help. However, then it takes you 1 minute of waiting to get back to the game. And anything that would happen if you not playing for, that 1 minute, you're going to have to then face. So then the next time they go into that hint, they're like, oh man, it's going to cost me. This will be the last time, and they will just stay there and focus. So, in fact, procedure, step by step. If I asked you what the 5th word of Hotel California is, but you're not allowed to sing it in your head, too late. So, but actually, if it was a procedure and I said, what's the 5th word? Well, that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
If I said, please bring me to San Francisco airport because I want you to pick me up next week. Well, if I was smart, what I wouldn't do is drive and have you as a passenger and then say, all right, thank you, drive home. Now, my wife makes me do that because she hates it when I'm in the car when she drives because she thinks I'm like nitpicking every detail. I've never said a word. I've never criticized. She just thinks that I'm in my head judging every. So I drive and then we swap and then she goes on. Now, if I wanted her to know, I would probably say, honey, drive to the airport. It's on 101 and it's just south of whatever. And then if she was to say, okay, what do I do now? I'm like, I would happily tell her. If she took a wrong turn, I'd happily say, all right, you need to get back on the highway. When we got to the airport, what I should do is say, let's go back and do that again. And let's keep doing that until you don't ask for help, you don't make a mistake, and you get to the airport, less traffic in 15 minutes. Now, if I did that, and I'd say, you can ask for all the help you want, you can make all the mistakes you want, then what we turn into are the 3 Ps of learning, which is you're a prep learner that says, I'm going to bring up Google Map and I'm going to study it, I'm going to read the directions, I'm going to memorize it before I ever leave. To me, that's learning style. The other one is I'm going to keep going, and then when I don't know what to do, I'm then going to check Google Map or I'm going to ask directions. And then you can be me, which is I just go wrong and I go, well, let's see what's out here, but then I'll never make that turn again. And it might take me an hour to go 15 minutes, but when I'm done, I know the town. Call that the plug away learner. What you can't do, they're just plugging away.
Plug away.
You cannot let a plug away learner figure out that cheating will get you through learning faster than learning. So we actually built something, Allen Interactions, where it was a multiple choice question. And it was really cool because if you got them right or wrong, it would say the ones that are right would have red checks, the ones that are wrong would have X, and they would kind of tell you right or wrong, and then it would clear out. You have to do it again. I thought that was great. Except if you picked them all and you hit submit, it would show you what the right answers were. So students figured out every time. Pick them all, hit submit. Oh, the first 2 and then the last one, they cheated. So being you're going to have that, don't let a cheater get through faster. All right, but the pause learn. This is the other thing we do is we say, I can tell you're a prep learner because you spent X amount of time or you clicked on reference before. It took you 3.5 attempts on average to get through this stuff. You're a plug away learner, I can tell, because you're getting the 3rd try feedback every time. But I make you go back and do it again, it takes you 5 attempts. Try being a pause learner. And we actually do that, is we tell them how many attempts it's taking. And we go, look, we're on your side. We want you to take as few attempts as possible. So in your prototypes, if you have, how does hint work? You know, what happens if you click 3 times wrong? What if you say, show me? What happens when you get to the end? Do you make them go back? Any kind of a progress, like you've gotten 4 out of 5 wrong. Do you stop them when they get to 3 wrong and go, you can't get an 80%, start over? Or do you force them to get to the end and say, look, you're already there, you know, but you're gonna have to finish anyways before we go back. All right, concept, that's a decision. Given a situation, like a lion, I see a gazelle, it's running. Do I chase the gazelle or not? Why or why not? Having people be able to make good decisions and know why is a concept. So when you're doing your content, some of it's a concept. Problem solving is putting them all together. It's basically SimCity, it's Myst. They all have to be connected. You need to understand how they connect, how they track and follow. And you tell no one how they did till the very end, and then you make them start all over again, like life. No one's telling you wrong, try again, or no one's going around putting little red X's. You just get to where you're going to go and say that didn't work out. So when you look at your content, if you say, I need to have a fact-based interaction, you should prototype 1, maybe 2 memory games. If it's a step-by-step procedure, you need to be prototyping out something that would have someone go from beginning to end, let them get hints, let them get mentoring, and then perhaps say, now that you're at the end, would you like to go back? If you think your students will get frustrated, then what you could say is when you get so far and you show them what are right and wrong, at any time they can just start over so they don't wait till the end. Concept, you know, it's sort of the double question. What is it? Why? And give them so many choices that they would have to look it up. We did something for anti-terrorism that would say, first, what would you attack? Why? Well, there's like 8 things they could attack, and each of those had 4 whys. And then it would be, what would you attack it with? There's fuel and nuclear and biologic, and then each of those had like 6 subsets, but this was the content, it was that much stuff, and then they had to justify why. What they found out is, I want to bring up the PDF and look it up, because there's so many choices, I'm going to be here all day. And then when we wrote it out, we made sure there were enough scenarios so that they would get fuel-based device twice in enough scenarios so that they would see 2 different applications of it. All right, then we already talked about make sure that you're taking care of students that will make mistakes as they don't know, and also the ones who don't care and they don't want to know what the right answer is. Kind of talked about the mistakes. And then the last one is, in your prototypes, please build the unsolvable. Because 3 things happen after learning. You go on the job, and you do everything you were trained to do, and everything goes right. You never make a mistake, you never lose a sale, you never break anything. And how often does that happen? Never. But that's what our e-learning is designed around. Is we tell you, if you learn this and you pass the test, you will do a good job, no worries. Well, when that doesn't work out, people lose confidence, and that's when it gets back to, I don't trust you. I don't think what you told me works. I'm going to stop trying. If you give them the situation training where it doesn't work out and you say that's the best you could do, they might try a couple, 3 times, and that's what the Kobayashi Maru was in Star Trek, the unwinnable situation that builds character. We really believe that you need to give them a few that are real life, where no matter what you did, customer service, the customer's still angry. You couldn't sell this person. And then what you're judging is what their thought process was. You go, you could not have done a better job. Because then they go, you know what, when that happens in the real world, I'll be ready for it. All right, and then I'm not going to go much into CCF, that's sort of our, everything should have context. It should be a scenario. It should be hard. They should be able to make mistakes. What they do with the mouse and the keyboard should make them think the way they would think on the job. And feedback, if you tell them the right answer, then you ask if they're going to get it right unless they're really distracted. However, if you ask them and then you tell them if they're right or wrong and why, they will read it because they want to know. So that's the, we spent a whole day teaching that one. E-learning manifesto, all of this stuff, we got a group of individuals that got together and put this up and they wrote it. So I'm just giving you that website of, it's a good place to go look. There's some research, there's some other resources out there. All right, so now we are at the prototyping. So the idea of prototyping, and this will be the last thing that I want us to figure out something to prototype, is there are 3 tracks in a prototype. We were just at Apple Computer having this exact discussion because they're using Agile and they're having problems. Well, everyone does. Even we do. I mean, and we're not saying it's a silver bullet and you do this and all of a sudden your problems go away, but you address them differently. And the number one thing for a prototype is there are 3 tracks in a prototype. By 3 tracks, we're saying at the end is where you want to be. Track 1, functional. You wireframe it. You sketch it. You say this is what will happen. If you click here, then flip the chart, this will happen next. If you click here, flip the chart. PowerPoint. Just really quick. People do it in Visio. People do it in whatever tool. However, you're always going to have someone in the room that's going to go, I don't see it. I don't get it. So you need to have a visual prototype, which is going to be the third one. No, actually the second one is the visual, where they're just saying this is basically how it would lay out. And they start off using clip art. They go get some stock photo from one of the sites, Shutterstock or something. They just kind of lay it out because some people will say, oh, okay, I'm cool, I can see how it looks. It's sort of the user interface of it. And then you have the wordsmither. Because someone's going to go, well, I don't like, that's not the right words, it's not the right verbiage, that's not our acronym. So we say if you take a small enough piece of content and you have all 3 of these tracks going, then if you just take one screen and you make it look good, and you take one screen, they don't have to be the same, and you use the right acronyms, you use the right verbiage, you use the right wordsmithing, you take those 3 personalities in a room and you get them to all trust you. And then they'll be like, all right, I'm willing to look at the wireframe because I know it'll be pretty. Now, the wireframe you're going to end up doing more of because there might be multiple activities. But if you don't do at least one version of this is how it'll look pretty, and here it is, and this is our logo, and this is, kind of taking it all the way out, you're going to get hesitation, and they're just not going to be able to even look at any kind of prototypes. So I would say to us, that would be the most important part. What we're going to do is just on a whiteboard, and we're instructional people, and we can handle it. But I'm sure you guys have all witnessed stakeholders that just don't like the prototypes because they don't trust. That's what it really is. They think that you don't get what it's supposed to look like. They think you don't get how important it is to use our terminology and our verbiage because you didn't spend the time to put it in a prototype. And we're saying, well, then do one. Just sort of like a Monopoly game, and you have one chance card, and you have one community chess card, and you build the dog, and then the other pieces are just pieces of paper that say this is a train. But the dog was carved. And go, I'm going to have a train, it's going to be the same size as the dog, it'll be the same quality of the dog. But then you have train, shoe, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. So that's sort of all the high-level concepts of prototyping. So what I'd like to do now is, this is the introduction in the middle, is I like to go around the room and find out what kind of content, what kind of audience, what kind of training you're doing, if it's fact, procedure, concept, problem solving, if it's technology, soft skills, leadership. Because what I'd like to do is pick maybe 2 kind of concepts and then start having you guys do some initial sketches. And then based on how much time we have, we can kind of come together, show the sketches, and then have you guys go off and then sort of make changes to the sketches. Because I really believe if we're good at sketching things out on notebook, paper, or on flip charts, that I'll trust that you have people with clip art or who can go to Shutterstock or go to Google Images and start putting stuff together in like PowerPoint. So that'd be my question. Do you guys trust that you can do any prototyping in PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Right? Yet again, if you pretend I click and it moves along, who knows? All right, so what I'd like to do now is kind of go around, so we'll start here. So if you would introduce yourself and then kind of, what kind of stuff are you trying to go train on?
So my name's Mary McCanta. I work at Bloomberg, which is a financial news company. I actually work in one of our technical departments, and what my team does, it's sort of our secondary job. We all work in the field, but then we also develop online trainings for our particular group. So I've been doing this for about 8 years or so now, and it's all e-learning. The audience is very stable. We have very little turnover. We have probably 200 people globally. And one of our challenges is coming up with relevant training when people have been there for 20 years. So, yeah, so that's kind of mostly technical training. We don't really do soft skills or anything. We hand off, I mean, we have an HR department that does a lot of that, so most of ours are technical.
So there's a quick question. What kind of mistakes do they make? Like, have a situation where they wouldn't do the right thing and you're kind of scratching your head and going, well, I guess is it because they don't know, or because they don't want to know, or because they know better? So give one situation.
Well, the one that we're confronting right now is really a project management problem, where we're swapping out 200,000 keyboards. And we have some people who are good at tracking what's going on or keeping up, and some who are not. So this is kind of soft skills, but it's also extremely relevant to our, to our job. So this is when I've done the needs analysis. All the managers said, I've got some people who are doing, 50 a week, and I've got some people who have 2 or 3, and they don't really know they're even behind. So, so yeah, that's kind of the thing that I'm dealing with.
You can just jump on me, I'm a recruiter. That doesn't work in training and development. Yeah.
My name is Lisa Schaller. I work on a training team. I'm kind of the accidental instructional designer. And I do lots of soft skills trainings as well as compliance, like safety and compliance. And I'm working on, one of the trainings that I'm actually working on right now has to do with medical leaves and medical leaves of absences, and having all of our HR partners understand kind of what the entire process is and what they can do and what they can't do kind of legally. So.
Oh, cool. I know people with compliance born, but no. Actually, pretty cool. Consequences are so cool.
Yeah.
Hi, Barbara Perman, new to this chapter and to ATD. I am a learning and development consultant. I've been with the University of California. I'm just about to make a career change next week. But I would say at the university, one of the challenges has been the online sexual harassment prevention, 2-hour training. Number one, making the scenarios interesting but not too racy. And the first one was like, wow, this is very interesting. But then those questions, those choosing the right scenario and all the thought that goes behind it.
Okay, great.
My name's Alicia Klatt. I also work for the UC Berkeley for the Office of Environment, Health and Safety, doing mostly online training. So currently I'm working on a fire safety training for residents of the campus dorms and apartments.
Now, I haven't asked you guys that question of what mistakes could be made, because when, like, they could do something illegal, they could do something illegal and unethical and vulgar, and then from the safety standpoint, I think we
could throw a birthday cake with burning candles down the trash chute and start a fire.
Yeah. What's the consequences? Is the fun thing, something.
Quick story, you'll love this one. My wife and I were renting a house in Minnesota, and opened the flue, made sure the chimney was open, looked up, looks good, put in a dirt flame, fired it up, and then all of a sudden the smoke was just pouring in. And I'm just sitting, we're in the basement, and there's no windows. And so I'm like, I knew I'm not going to douse it with fire, with water. There's just no way. So I basically got 2 oven mitts, like a steel where you put like sodas in, like whatever you call it, tub, picked it up, put it in, and carried it. My wife was just so she's like, you can't do that, put it back in. And then she got water doused, and then we were like out of the, like we couldn't live in the basement for like a week. And I was like, dirt flame doesn't burn that. But it was just kind of that whole like the consequences of, my brain was just, I went through, because I'm in this field. I measured, there are 10 choices I had. And I kind of went through, I'm like, me getting burns on my arm if I run fast would be 2nd degree. That to me was the least consequence. And my wife was just going, you're going to hurt yourself. I'm like, that actually would be the best outcome of me just getting a couple burns. So it'd be interesting to prototype that one out.
I'm Paula Moran again. working with a credit union, and I have a lot of different projects, but one, we are rolling out a CRM, and not only do we have to change, which we don't have one right now, so we have to train everyone what the heck it is and how to use it, but also training the testers what a CRM is, how you should use it, and how to actually be a tester of all things. That's not their regular jobs, so our UAT testers, trying to figure out how do you do that role, and how do you even know when the system is going wrong?
When a CRM is going on.
Well, we're not really using it as a sales thing, we're using it as a customer management. And so it's supposed to be a certain workflow, you know, you open the case, you put this in, but since they've never done that before, not only do they have to be able to do that, but then know if the system is not, you know, they have this workflow and this is what's supposed to happen, and
Wow.
being able to compare to this enormous Excel sheet that what I'm seeing on the screen is not what's supposed to be happening according to Excel.
Yeah, Toyota Collections just did that. They went with Salesforce for collections, and we're like, really? And then when we did the training, like, oh yeah, it makes complete sense. Because, you know, that's a customer you're trying to get them to pay, and they get 30 days late, 60 days late, or 90 days late. So instead of closing the sale, it's a repossession. And, you know, and all the workflow to...
The process works.
Yeah.
You hope not to sell anything. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Barry Mullen. I have my own business called Speak and Write, and I teach all kinds of writing skills. So audit report writing, policy and procedure writing, business writing, technical writing. Mostly I do internal live programs for companies. I do some e-learning programs, mostly in the way of follow-up reinforcement programs. I'm struggling to find an adequate way to teach writing through e-learning. It seems to be challenging. Maybe I haven't been creative enough to figure that out, but it's much more effective to be live with a person to help them sit down and train this topic. So we'll see.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to introduce in that is we're really bouncing around the idea of first versus third person training. Does that make sense to you guys? So first person is you're trying to get them to do it, which is really hard in e-learning because you have to judge what they're doing. But then there's the idea of you become the judge and you have to evaluate someone else and give them guidance. And we've started doing sort of the two-phase approach of before you are good, you have to be able to evaluate someone else. So we're working with the Stevens Institute of Technology for presentation skills. So what we do is we first show them a presentation and we have to get them to score it.
Sure.
Well, we have how it should be scored. And we teach them what the rubric is, and then we try to get them to apply it. And they have to keep watching the presentation over and over again, and every one of the things they get right are like, good, but you didn't get these, and they have to keep doing this, and then once they've said, you can now score 3 presentations in a row, so there's like 20, but the minute they get 3 in a row, we're like, you got it. And then we have them with YouTube upload themselves, and then they have to score themselves. And then they can redo it over and over again until they give themselves a high enough score. Then we have peer evaluations, and then it's mathematically figuring out how did you do, because if you're pretty similar to the other peers, then you scored yourself accurately. So the only reason I bring that up is when you're thinking about any kind of prototyping, sometimes you want to put yourself in that third person. And on the compliance side, with a search engine that is not Google, we had this thing called, yeah, it's one of those, you know, it's.
I remember those, they used to exist.
Yeah, they used to exist. We had what's called sewer settle. So, third person, someone comes to you like, here's something that just happened. Do you want to take this to court or do you want to settle? And what you have to do is interview people. You'd have a little worksheet of they followed this policy, they didn't follow this policy, they violated, and you were being offered a settlement of $500,000. And you either took it or you took it to court. If you went through and you said, you know what, I got a case, then it would be dismissed. But if you went into court without a case, then you would get $1 million fine. But, you know, it was that whole idea of sometimes you should go to court and sometimes you shouldn't. And if you settled and you had a case, that was wrong. So what it ended up is after so many cases, how much did it cost the company? Well, you know what? It should have only cost the company $300,000. You cost the company $700,000. So that was that whole third person. And I didn't know if when you're thinking about a way Sometimes if you get someone to be good at judging, and then you say, now you write, now apply the rubric to your own writing. Not saying e-learning is the best way, but sometimes that's a component of.
It's better than what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So,
And then I don't know if you would if they would have peer evaluation. That's the other thing, you can get people scoring and all stuff. I missed the person.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Hall. I do organizational effectiveness, so right now I'm not doing a ton of training. But we are planning on rolling out change management to our entire organization and have different sets of layers of expectations for personal understanding of change management, the same way you do like a disc to understand your own personal style versus like a leader who needs to understand how they should be thinking about change in relation to the organization that they manage and drive. And then for the practitioner, the person who has to actually do it because they are part of the project. So thinking through how would I, might I do either deliver some of this electronically versus doing it in an in-person way. I like the scenario approach. I like experiential. I'm always looking for ways to do that. So I haven't yet had to think through how we would do it, but I'm definitely interested in some of the stuff you're talking about.
Have you thought of some books to use along with it for people maybe, like and then tie that in?
For we have a community practice that we're starting up, and that would definitely be what I would suggest for everybody who is going to be a practitioner. So any of the project managers, business analysts, the people that are going to use it a lot and need to be really, really strong in it, I definitely think that's the way to go for them.
There are just a lot of stories out there, like our iceberg is melting, like the Penguin book and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're just, but just having some sort of common story or something, I don't know the story.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what.
Okay.
I'm Jenny, and I'm an instructional designer at Wells Fargo, and do a lot of design, all kinds of big process systems, sales, service, all different things. And I'm actually, this is so timely for me because I'm actually really doing this right now, literally like tonight. I'll probably be up late working on it, but maybe this weekend. But getting basically a prototype out of, it's more just like a roadmap, a structure to help kind of a professional development roadmap for a pilot group of people who are going through kind of a new program and kind of new college grads who are coming into a certain business and walking through experiencing the business, learning all about it and all these different things. But then I'm working on activities to help them kind of walk through and have that experience and sort of build the structure. But a lot of it is very self-guided, but all different things. So it won't all be done when I can't get it up for review. What I'm doing is I'm really trying to give the quick visuals, really like they have it in the SMEs and our partners have an idea where I'm going with this and make sure I'm on the right track for how they've envisioned this to look and work.
Yeah, sometimes just prototyping out a menu.
Yeah.
We've got one where you're going up a mountain and you're kind of like going, you got to bring the goat up the mountain. And, it's funny how valuable some people feel just having that menu is. That's why people spend millions of dollars on LMS. So, quick insight, there is a big push in the technology side to just give up on learning management systems.
On what?
And on learning management systems. Even on LRS and TINCAN, just give up. The reason is because Google Analytics. If you have a website, do you know every page they've been on? Do you know how long they've been there? Do you know how many times they've gone back to it? Well, just pretend you're e-learning that every single screen was a page. You would get everything SCORM doesn't give you. And you wouldn't have to track it. You wouldn't have to report it. It's just there. That when you got the answer wrong and went to feedback, that is a unique piece of content. And if it's in a CMS, content management system, that means it's using the exact same content as. So pretend you already have all these videos out there when you're building your learning, you just point to a video as reference. Well, it's already linked up. You don't have to there's no copying and pasting. There's all the stuff we do to tag to make sure that, if something changes, that we have to then go and know what to change. What if it was the reference manual? So there's a big push on the big giant Silicon Valley companies to just ditch learning management systems. To just go, you know what? We're fighting them. We're fighting for SCORM. We're fighting all this stuff. Why do we need them? So it's kind of an interesting, perspective on, with a content management system, you could import an HTML5 template to play Jeopardy. keep going to that, but everyone kind of gets that. So pretend you built a Jeopardy game in HTML5, that's page type. You know, and you could, they're just playing around with this whole concept of learning activities are just a page type. And if that was in a content management system, we would get all the data you'd ever want without having to pay Sal or SuccessFactors or anyone else all this money. Because they see them as just, it's just a gating system. And I brought that up because it's the menu. They go, an LMS is really authentication and a menu, and it's the worst menu you could ever think of to launch a course. And we're paying how much for that?
And it's just, so there's a, yeah, it's just a one-time thing. It's not something you can go back to and really reference, yeah.
Compliance. But
Compliance.
it's your proof.
Yeah,
Check.
that's, that you
But if you're
turn-
That
using
proof is
Google
somewhere else.
Analytics, and then you have better proof.
So I have a quick question then on that. I talked to someone from one of those organizations who does that, and they did a presentation on how they were using Google Analytics to describe their prototyping, and they were doing hit rates and all of that. So during the break, I went up to one of them and I said, so if you have 100 people taking something and you look at a page and you see where they're making their hits and that, and this item here has 100 clicks and this has 1,500s, what does that tell you, lead you anyway to what you keep and what you get rid of? It says, well, we get rid of the thing that's 100 and we keep the thing that's got 1,500. Obviously, there's interest there. It says, I use my credit union's page, and the reason I hit something 7 times is because it's worthless. And it takes me that many times to figure it out. When I hit something 1 time and leave it, I've gotten what I need and I move on. And they told me they don't know the difference.
Yeah.
They cannot figure out the difference using that process. It's like,
Yeah.
so I just kind of, thanks, I just wanted to double check, because if you had some secret sauce, I'd like to know what it was.
No, and
But,
it is all about the setup, which, you know, Google is doing that. They're actually not doing what you're saying. They are not using internally
Mhm.
the idea if you hit it all the time, then we get rid of things that they're not. They're trying to figure out, if they have a salesperson, they put them through this, they go, well, this person shouldn't be in sales. This person's got a long road to be a good salesperson. This person's got a short road. This person needs to get out of training and get it out there on the road right now. They're doing a Myers-Briggs approach in their training. Because they've got smart people, but you're right. What you don't want to do is have the IT departments take it over and then think that that kind of methodology is going to replace
Right.
item analysis. But then I go, SCORM? What kind of item analysis do you have in SCORM? You know, what menu items were started, which were completed, how far through it, and what was your final score that you passed? Yes.
I just want to let you know it's 7:23.
Oh, so almost done, huh? Oh, okay, well, that went fast.
I'm just here out of interest. I do soft skills in person. So,
Okay.
yeah, my name is Victoria. Hi.
As the Alan Montague, I've been building some best practice training for a client on setting up and using WebEx. And actually, having seen you do something very similar to this a while ago, I actually used something like this to, I built a screen that allowed me to, you know, basically mimic the dialogue on WebEx for the setup, and I've just like come up with a dozen scenarios, and I score, you know, and I just throw them a scenario, throw them the screen. If they get it right, great. We tell them. If they get it wrong, I tell them why they got it wrong, and give them another. And if they get 2 right, they're good.
All right, well, being that we don't quite have time, and I'd be happy to, so what I do is offer, if you guys have any interaction, if you want to share like sketches back and forth, make sure there's no confidential information, we'd be perfectly happy to go through a few iterations with you. So I'm going to show you here something we did. Remember that HSBC project I told you about? We created 17 interactions, prototyped them out, sketched them out, and then got them here. And what we ended up doing is we created these content grids with like spreadsheets that fit into these prototypes. And we actually gave them to all the business owners that have created the PowerPoint presentations and said, can you please move your PowerPoints into these? So we, initially HSBC wanted to hire 5 vendors, and we convinced them to just hire us. Because all we're going to do is prototype. All we're going to do is create these activities. And then in the amount of time that their people would be spending, you know, getting the content and doing reviews, we're like, all you got to do is fill in these spreadsheets and it'll just port in. So we basically got a way to save out a spreadsheet as XML. So kind of at a high level, these were our 4 developers. And so, for example, one was what we called a conversation. Now, when you're looking at this, what you need to do from a prototype standpoint is, could I do this in PowerPoint? And we would say, if you ever had a create your own adventure book when you were younger, did it have any complex math?
No.
No.
Jump to page 23.
Right. So here's the thing is, if you were doing scoring, I know this is going to be subtle, I have all these little subtleties that people really like, that saves you so much effort. In a create your own adventure book, it tells you how you're doing on that page. Well, being it's a book, there are probably 3 pages that look exactly the same, except they have 3 different scores on them. And with all the technology we have, it's okay, because one graphic, it's the same graphic on all 3 pages. So I would just say that whenever you're prototyping this out, even when you build it for real in whatever tool, please don't try to say when you get this one add 5 to your score, when you get this one subtract 5. Just get there and say, right now you're at a 50. However, if you went this way, you're at a 70. And it's like, that's a graphic on the screen. So this is the same thing. This is, it's all kind of sucking it in. So of course this is just text that kind of explains it. But the idea is, this is a really cool multiple choice question where we have, if you're on this question, which is 1, your satisfaction is at 50. So if you think about prototyping, it's, okay, we prototyped out 4 buttons for choices, and then being we knew it was going to be in every language in the world, we said we'll never fit it. So we figured out, well, you know what? We'll just put what the idea of the question is, but the actual text of the question can be in a bigger box. So that's part of the prototype, to try to figure that out. We had the idea of what is the customer thinking, so you can kind of get it behind the scenes. We have a coach, and to get credit, you have to turn the coach off. But if you don't, and you pick something like greet, introduce yourself, respond to the question, so that would actually be the thing. And if I pick it, then that's what's being said. Here's the expert feedback. And then see what they're thinking. So there's actually 2 pages. There's a page where we have a question, and there's a page where we have feedback with the button that says, all right, let's continue and ask another question. And it just repeats over and over and over. But being that the question that comes up is like a create your own adventure book, that it ends up being very dynamic. I mean, it really is. There are a lot of ways you can go, but you can build this in PowerPoint. So you can prototype it in PowerPoint. You can actually prototype one of these, and it ended up that they had about 100 of these. But all we really want to do is get one interaction going. And again, if I disable the coach, that little expert comes, goes away. A really quick one, for example, like a Venn diagram for product knowledge. So the internet's a little bit slow, but the idea is if you have 50 products and you're trying to figure out what they all do, one of the concepts was feature benefit. So we said, well, what if we had a prototype where we put up a Venn diagram and said, well, here's a feature and here are 3 of our products. And you could take the push pin and you could put it somewhere. And then you might want to try somewhere else. And on the second try, we would say, more than one product matches. I might try this one. Great. And now what about the fastest method for overseas transfer? Might be a telegraphic transfer. Can be done via many channels, mail transfer. And then over here is my reference. That is the descriptions of everything. It could be a PDF, it could be a website. Come back. So I can send you this link. That the idea is these were 17 things that we thought like a big giant, I'm going to show a big giant matching, is we kind of sketched these out. We built them in something like Visio, just stepped through. At the same time, we had a graphic artist doing stills. We could bring them together in PowerPoint. And 732 modules ended up in one of these 17. And the stuff that didn't, it just ended up being next.
Say that again, of the...
732 modules.
Right.
There are 17 activities. 90-some-odd% of the content ended up fitting in one of those.
Oh.
And the stuff that didn't, they ended up doing a
So
next.
you might have 5 of those 732 modules being very, very similar, but so like you talked about different types, how to handle a wire transfer, how to handle a direct debit transfer. There were 2 different modules, but you pulled them into. Okay.
So what we did is, if in insurance, what they said is I have 7 different insurance products. If we could say we could put 3 of them together 3 of them together, you know, like have different combinations. We would say that Venn diagram works when you need to know that there are 3 things similar, you need to differentiate them. But that has insurance and credit cards. What credit card do you want? What home loan do you want? And then we had the conversation. Well, if you're trying to have a conversation with a customer as to which one solves my problem, well, in all of the different units, there was some content that was this concept back and forth. There were some that were step-by-step procedures, and we had one that was like a 1, 2, 3, 4. You did the step, you moved to the next one. So we were looking at, there were like 4 or 5 different ways of doing a fact, or 4 or 5 ways of, you know, like this was a way of doing another fact, which here we have all these different things. Stop limit order, market price order, each of these has information. And then we have all these customers, and each one of them have what they want. And what you ended up having to do is then match them up, and we call this the Price is Right game, which the ones that are right stay and the other ones go back. And you have to keep doing this over and over again until you get them all. And this is another fact-based game. But then those things are in multiples, where we picked these are somewhat related. So you end up going through repetition. And then when you get one where you're like, oh, I've already done target, buy, sell order, and stop limit in a previous one, like great, because those 2 get put in right away because I know those. Sometimes they call that reverse chaining. That supposedly they can teach a 5-year-old how to rebuild a carburetor by taking 2 parts out, and then they put those 2 back, and then they take 4 out, and then 8 out, and then over time they eventually take the whole thing apart. And this 5-year-old can put it all back together because they kind of went from, because things were familiar. I remember that one, I remember that one. All right,
What's built in?
I was
Oh,
gonna say,
this-
do you use your Zebra Zap things for this, or is this custom Flash programming?
Well, okay, this was Flash. We have Zebra Zap's versions, but yeah, it's Flash. But again, I would say like Lectora. You could do this in Lectora and Storyline if you're willing to do the state programming. You could do this in Storyline. And I'm not going to get into Storyline. Would be great to build once, but if you want to do 20 of these, not the tool, because you would have to basically reprogram each one from scratch.
So that, I was using Storyline for what I was doing, but I built it on the basis of, you know, I want to understand what the concept should be, and then what I have to do is write the state. So set everything to the right states, and then I write the one state. You know, if this is all right, turn that one on. Otherwise, turn that one on.
Exactly.
Test it.
Unfortunately,
We're out of time.
we don't have to go home, but we can't stay here. I've been asked to tell you gotta go all the way back around. But this is a really rich conversation, and there is a bar right across the street, the 10-inch Grill, if you want to walk across and continue the conversation. And Steve, as a small token of thank you, we have one of our chapter blankets from our 70th anniversary of our chapter last year.
My wife and I are spending a weekend in Carmel because we have to be in LA, so we're kind of so.
Perfect, that's
This will be perfect.
It could get chilly in Carmel.
If you could, yes.
To the people on the feed, we will get you the recording and we will get all your questions answered. Look for an email tomorrow. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.